Hi, I'm Patrick Cobb with AARP South Carolina. We're pleased to be a sponsor of the Charleston Post and Courier's Pints and Politics series. AARP is a nonprofit organization, so we don't endorse candidates. For more information, go to aarp.org/SC.
Hello, welcome to another edition of the Post and Courier Pints and Politics. I'm Autumn Phillips, managing editor. This is another virtual event, but I feel like we are so close sometime this year to being back in person, sitting together at a brewery, raising our glass, talking politics. Until then, it might feel like you're alone right now, sitting at your computer, looking at your phone, but 337 people signed up for tonight's event, watching this with you. After we talk to the governor, stay on. Andy Shane, our bureau chief here in Columbia, is going to join me, and we're going to talk about our legislative coverage, our staff, things that are happening here at the paper. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Skylar Croft, our political editor. He's been covering politics in South Carolina for more than 30 years. And Jamie Lovegrove, political reporter, and our governor, Henry McMaster.
Thank you. I think I covered you back when you ran against Fritz Hollings in the Senate back in 88-ish, I think.
Yes, that's right. I think I was his sixth victim.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for taking part, Governor.
I'm happy to do it, Skylar.
The one thing, when we set this up with your staff, they suggested we make this a bourbon pints and politics, which we thought that would be just too thirsty, but
A pint of bourbon is a lot of bourbon.
I would like to ask you though, how do you drink your bourbon? How do you mix that? And on top of that, do you also have a favorite beer? Since we are at a beer pub, is there something that you like in it?
Yeah, I guess I got an unsophisticated taste for beer. I've always started way back in younger days. Pabst Blue Ribbon was the craze in South Carolina, but that sort of switched over to Budweiser and Bud Light and all that. But bourbon of almost any kind, Scotch of almost any kind, just not too much.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite. How about you? What do you drink?
I like martinis and I like a good Manhattan. So
Yeah, okay, sophisticated guy.
Yeah.
All right.
well, one of the big movements in the State House this year was the abortion bill, the fetal heartbeat bill, and that passed. And you said long ago that you would sign that if you put that in front of me.
That's right.
But right now the issue is in the courts, and it's going to be there for a while, for years to come. But I guess my question for you is, you're an advocate of it, but what would you tell a teenage woman who gets pregnant that by state law she has to carry through and become a mother? And then on top of that, what would you tell an adult female who gets pregnant, married, unmarried, that by state law, the state is telling her she has to become a mother?
Well, there are exceptions, of course, in the fetal heartbeat bill, and they're all around the country. They're different kind of laws, but you have to draw the line somewhere, and that's a human life. And I think it begins at conception, and I think that there is a right to life. Now, the heartbeat bill was, you can detect a heartbeat by ultrasound at about 8 weeks, which is relatively early. But I think we have to draw a line somewhere, and that is a place where there's no doubt that that is a life, and that child has a right to live.
How would you consult, say, a teenage girl who gets pregnant and has to have that child?
I would say that life is full of ups and downs, and most of the literature that I read of women who have had abortions, it seems that most of them regret it deeply in later years. I think we just need to avoid that. And of course, one answer is don't get pregnant. Of course, the other is that if you do, then there are consequences for actions. But to take a life is not good. And if that is a life, then it should not be taken except for the most extraordinary circumstances. Inconvenience is certainly not one of them. Can't afford it is certainly not a reason to take a human life. That's what I think. And I think more and more people around the country see things that way. These tides go back and forth, but I think that the right to life is one that's essential, and that we must protect it. And we do not want to have a culture of abortion, as some people call it. And Planned Parenthood, I think, has been revealed as having various motives. They do certain things. They're very helpful in some things, but these are the abortions that are promoted, I believe, by Planned Parenthood are just not good. They're against our culture. And we must have a culture that promotes and protects life, and anything that infringes on that is very dangerous. Mother Teresa, whom everybody's heard of, has said that when asked what is the worst thing that is happening today, or what should be our top priority, and she said eliminating abortion, because that sends a message of the breakdown of that strongest of all relationships is between the mother and the child. And if it's okay to break that relationship, then nothing else is off limits.
Some lawmakers, including some Republicans who voted for and supported the fetal heartbeat bill, have said in the week since that they would like to see, now that has passed, laws to make it easier to get birth control, laws to make it easier to get adoptions.
Sure.
Are those some things you could support?
Yeah, those are yes. Adoptions, there are a lot of children looking to be adopted. And that is a much better alternative, no doubt about it.
And birth control?
Sure.
Some Senator Tom Davis introduced a bill to make it much easier to get that. Yeah.
That's okay with me.
Yeah. So of course, this law has now been blocked in the courts early with the preliminary injunction from the federal judge. What we've seen in several other states over the last few years when they pass restrictive abortion laws is if they do end up losing further down the line, we've seen this in Texas, Wisconsin, that they end up having to pay for the attorney's fees for Planned Parenthood. Sometimes it's millions of dollars. Texas taxpayers paying millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood because of losing those lawsuits. If South Carolina taxpayers end up having to pay millions of dollars in attorney's fees to Planned Parenthood, how does that advance the pro-life cause?
Well, if we had to worry about paying attorney's fees or going to court, then we would pass no new laws, wouldn't we? Because every law can be challenged. And people say, well, this is settled law, the 1973 decision, the Roe against Wade, and then the Casey decision. But if you go back and look at the Supreme Court, its history, you see there have been a lot of instances where they have reversed their view of things over time. Remember Plessy versus Ferguson was that the early 1900s or late 1800s, said segregation was all right on interstate commerce. And then along came Brown versus Board of Education, which was started in South Carolina in Clarendon County. And they said that equal is separate is separate is inherently unequal. Now that is complete reversal of the earlier decision. And if you read the cases on abortion, the right to life, those kind of things, you see where the different questions, different situations present different answers. And they've been going in favor of what we call the right to life. We never know what's going to happen when the Supreme Court hears something. And I'm sure that they'll be hearing this one or similar ones as well. But you have different circuits as well that say different things. And if there's a conflict in the circuit, then that's when the Supreme Court likes to hear a case. So ultimately, that's when this case, this law or one like it will end up.
There has been this debate in the pro-life community for quite a few years now about sort of the tactical way to go about this. Do you want to pass laws that sort of gradually restrict abortion that might have a better chance of getting upheld, sort of chip away at abortion access? Or do you want to pass really, much more extreme laws to try to get the Supreme Court to completely overturn their precedent, which, could be a much heavier lift? Why do something like this as opposed to, Mississippi has passed a 15-week ban that they're hoping to get the Supreme Court to take up. Other states have done other measures that are curtailing abortion access, but not as dramatic as this.
Well, it depends on what your definition of dramatic is. It depends on what the circumstances are, but some would say that 15 weeks, 8 weeks, if the court is going to go to 15 weeks, and why not go to 8 weeks? You just never know. But what you have to do when a state is passing laws is they must do what they think is right and what is the best for their people. And if the courts strike it down, then we'll try again. If the courts uphold it, then hooray.
Our sponsor in all this is South Carolina AARP, and they've submitted a question. And I think it's just basically a general inertia question. South Carolina ranks 50th, which is last in the nation in terms of 401k savings. Thousands of South Carolina workers don't have access to a workplace retirement savings plan. Do you support a voluntary workplace retirement savings plan for individuals to save for their future? I guess what this is geared at is how do you make people financially literate based on the erosion of pensions and such?
Yeah, we have a pension problem here for state employees and all those on the state pension plan because we don't have enough money in it right now. We're short millions and millions of dollars. It's going to have to be addressed. But I think that the bigger part of that question is we have people that don't have a job. And in our state, we were aware of that. And we were just booming before the pandemic got here. Our unemployment rate was way down. But the way we handled the pandemic, we didn't shut everything down. And like they did in other states, we never closed down. We took a very targeted, light approach. And it worked because our unemployment rate now is one of the lowest, I think, maybe in the nation, but certainly one of the lowest in the Southeast. And that's where all the action is, the economic growth. So yes, we need to, I support all sorts of tax-free accounts for saving and particularly for education. But the larger question is people have to make money in order to save money. And one way to do that is you have to keep taxes low and you have to have people that are educated, that are trained, that we need to invest in the workforce, the infrastructure we need for the workforce of the future. We need to be thinking 10 years out, 20 years out. And I think in South Carolina, because of the pandemic, a lot of states went too far. Most of them, a lot of them up in the Northeast, Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin, a lot of the colder states, blue states, they call them. They just locked down everything, and a lot of them are still locked down now. Well, I don't know how they're going to recover. But when this money that's coming from the federal government, which is actually coming out of everybody, all of us, we're paying for it. It's not free money. But when those funds arrive here, we are in a position, since we did not close down, we took a very light, targeted approach, and we are ready to boom. So we will be able to use those funds to support our boom, while other states will have to be digging themselves out of a trench. I don't know if they can get out of it or not.
I'd say, so talking about the pandemic, and we do have some questions we want to ask you about that. You mentioned sort of the economic elements to it. We do also want to talk about the public health aspect of this. We have had more than 540,000 cases over the course of the pandemic in South Carolina, more than 9,000 deaths at this point. As you look back over about a year now that we've been dealing with this, just over a year.
Over a year. I'm aware it's over a year.
How would you grade South Carolina's response to this pandemic? And is there anything, as you look back on this past year, that you might have done differently?
There may have been a few things I might have done a little differently, but nothing of any significance. I think that we took the right approach. The first thing you must know is that no one person has the answer to everything. So that's why we put together a group called Accelerate SC, and we had over 30 people from academia, from education, business, law, medicine, and everything, hospital executives, everything in between, to chart a path. And what we did, and we took an approach that was different from other states. A lot of the states looked at the workforce, the population, and they divided them into essential and non-essential employees, or essential and non-essential jobs, which I think was the wrong way to do it. We all thought so. because to everyone, their job is essential. To their family, their job is essential. But what they did by doing that is they were closing down things that didn't need to be closed down, like outdoor activities, say, landscape companies, and just as one example of thousands. There's no reason to close that down. Everybody's outside, they're spaced off. No point in closing, but they closed them down. Some closed down churches, if you can believe that. They arrested people who are going to church to get married. It's hard to believe that, despite the First Amendment. And of course, we'd ask people, well, don't you know about the First Amendment? Say, yeah, but this is an emergency. We'll say, well, of course it's an emergency, but that's what the Constitution is for. Those are rules that are designed to keep us prospering and safe in emergencies. Good times take care of themselves. So we took a different approach. We determined about 30 different types of activities, locations, circumstances that would lend themselves most clearly to the spread of the virus, like barbershops and beauty parlors and gymnasiums and concerts and things like that. And we put limits or closed them for as short a time as possible. Then we opened them back up. As of about 3 weeks ago, we have no limitations at all, and just a few were still in existence. I think the last call was one, and the other was the limit of 250 on concerts and outdoor activities or indoor activities, which you could get a okay from the Commerce Department if you had a good plan to have a lot more than that, which is why we had football, why we had a lot of other things. I had a lot of those kind of activities, baseball. So I think we took the right approach. And going back and looking at that, I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I think our economic condition right now, and the fact that all the deaths rate is going down, the positivity rate is going down, the hospitals have fewer and fewer COVID patients in, and those that are in, fewer and fewer on ventilators. Everything is going in the right direction. People have jobs. There's small businesses that did not have to close, many are struggling, and we've done everything we could to get the funds to them they need to stay on their feet. We will continue doing that. I've asked for another $123 million from the legislature for that purpose. But I think that we did as well or better than any other state in the country. And I'm getting calls from my governor friends in other places, as well as people who are coming to South Carolina. They say we're a free state. We're safe. You can have your normal activities, and you don't have to stay locked up. So I think that's one accomplishment, but it wasn't my accomplishment. We had a lot of people thinking on exactly how to do this. We collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. And every time you use that approach, it works, because no one person has all the answers.
Sounds like you think if you were going to give South Carolina a grade for this response, it would be an A.
It'd be an A, maybe even an A+.
To the families of those 9,000 plus people who died, who may take issue with that, I mean, is there any consolation to them as they look back on this year and see that it may think that not everything was done to keep their families safe?
It is a tragedy. One life lost is a tragedy. We talked about earlier with the heartbeat bill. One life is a tragedy. We don't lose any. But this was a pandemic. It was unknown. We had no understanding of how to react. But I think that if you look at what we did, and we have businesses that are still prospering, we have people, we don't have the results, the negative results they have in other states. And you looked at those that shut everything down and still shut down, our results are better than this.
DHEC, this has been a real stress test for DHEC, State Health Agency, over the last year. They've had to bring in folks from some of the environmental side to help with the public health side. And they have come under criticism at times from legislators, from the public, in terms of the way that the tests were ramping up last year, in terms of the way the vaccine rollout was going, especially at the beginning. This is not a cabinet agency, but you do have significant control over the board. You appoint not only the chairman, but all the board's members.
That's right.
What have you made of the way DHEC has handled the last year? And is there anything the agency can do to improve? There are some pretty radical ideas in the legislature right now about what to do with DHEC moving forward.
Well, I think it's not because of this or in response to anything to do with this pandemic, but it's a big agency and it covers everything from nuclear reactors and those sorts of things to permits for opening stores and sewer lines and everything in between. Those responsibilities, I think there's a good argument they could be separated into two agencies, and we're looking closely at that. But I'll say this, there's a lot of talent in DHEC. And what we realized at the very beginning was responding to something like this is not a one agency approach. That's why we had the Emergency Management Division involved. That's why we had the National Guard involved. And we've been on telephone calls every morning now for weeks. Before that, we were meeting at the Emergency Management Division just about every day and having news conferences, you'll remember, quite often. But for weeks now, we've had the Emergency Management Division, DHEC, the National Guard, the Retail Association, the Medical Association, and the Hospital Association and my office on the phone almost every morning to see what the latest results were from the test, to look at the numbers. Our belief is that if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So the National Guard and Emergency Management Division, which of course leads the response in hurricanes and tornadoes, they know how to move things around to get people and things to where they're supposed to be, how to fix things. When we put all that talent together, I think we ended up with a tremendous team.
Some elements of the vaccine rollout have received criticism, including from some Republicans. Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey has been pretty critical, namely in his view of your decision not to prioritize teachers. Now teachers are eligible because we're in 1B, but this was earlier in the process, and he said that jeopardized the opportunity to get back into classrooms. John Warren, the Greenville businessman who challenged you in 2018, wrote an op-ed comparing us to other states. And I do have some stats, up-to-date stats right now. We are 30th in the percentage of doses that we've received and used. 78% of the doses we've received, we've used. 39th out of 50 states in terms of how many people have one.
78 what?
78% of the doses we've received, we've used.
That ain't right.
It's according to the CDC from yesterday.
I don't care. It's not right.
We're 39th in how many folks have one dose administered, which is 24% population, and 42nd in how many are fully vaccinated.
Well, I know that some of those statistics are not right, and we have had to challenge CDC and CMS on some of their rules and how they were doing things, and as a result, they got them changed. But I'll say yes, as far as teachers, if I had the authority to require the school districts to open up every school to every parent that wanted their children to be there, I'd have done it months ago.
Yeah.
I was calling for the children to go back to school,
Yeah.
those parents who wanted them to be there. If they didn't want to be there, that's another story. They could do it virtually, but they ought to be in school. The unintended consequences of the children not going to school have been enormous in terms of emotional health, mental health. Even suicides have gone up, and that's always the statistics are always late in coming in on that. I mean, it's been an enormous dislocation. And when the evidence started coming in from when the thing began in February and March, we were worried about children, young people going back to school. And then we found out, and so you remember schools were closed, but then we started finding out that the children are not the ones that are getting it. And when they get it, they very rarely show it. And if they do have it, they don't spread it just because of lung capacity.
But the issue is the teachers, right? And especially if the teachers, one issue has been in some small school districts, right? Say it's a small middle school, you have only a handful of teachers. If one teacher either gets the virus or is exposed to the virus and several of the teachers have to quarantine and have to be out of school, that jeopardizes all of those classrooms from coming into school too, if the teachers are forced to be out. And that's why the teachers were saying that they needed the vaccine, or why Senator Massey was talking about.
Everybody wanted the vaccine to go back, but the statistics and the pronouncements, even from the CDC and everything, was the classroom is probably the safest work environment that there is among them all.
Yeah.
And I remember the Charleston County schools, I don't remember how many students, thousands of students, they did a survey and analysis and turned out that a few teachers did have the virus, but they were giving it to each other. It was not coming from the children, and the teachers weren't.
But that's still a problem, right? I mean,
Beg pardon?
That's still a problem if the teachers are
Well,
giving
get
it
a
to each other, right?
substitute teacher, do
Yeah.
something, but everybody, your typical cashier in a grocery store sees more people today than an average educator, I believe. So there's hundreds of millions of dollars have come into the state with the CARES Act for personal protective equipment, everything from A to Z. We've offered that to every school, anyone who wanted it. From the very beginning, and there are school districts that stayed open from the beginning, notably in Anderson County. No problem. Somebody gets sick, they'd send them home. The private schools in the state, about 50,000 students, they have not closed down at all. They stayed 5 days face to face, no problem. Everywhere there is no evidence that supports the necessity of closing a school down because of the virus.
This is one of our submitted questions from a Post Courier reader. Every time a governor runs for office, a promise is made to improve the public school system. Yet our schools trail when measured against other states. Moving past COVID, what aren't we doing in South Carolina that we should be doing to move the schools forward? I know there's no magic bullet, but what isn't the legislature doing? What aren't the teachers doing? What aren't parents doing? How do you push South Carolina education into a top tier quality?
Well, I think we have to start early. That's why I've asked for funding across the board for 4K education across the state. That's why we've tried to we've given through the CARES Act money to the public schools, and also for private, religious, and independent schools. We wanted to do that because those parents are suffering as well, but our Supreme Court didn't allow us to do that, although the federal government thought that we'd be able to, but not allowed to do that. But there's resistance to change. I've asked for, and we've received pay raises for teachers. We want to have more.
Who's resisting? Could you point them out? For
Yeah,
us
I can.
tonight?
Well,
Who's resisting?
I can tell you. Well, look at the schools that are not open now. We have 79 school districts. I think about 50 something maybe are open to those parents who want the children to go 5 days a week. Now, who is resisting?
Well, I mean, that's a COVID question, but
Wait a minute. Yes, that is a COVID question, but it's also a very important question because those children who are not they can't learn virtually. That's not going to happen. We know that. In fact, we're having a question right now about testing at the standardized tests at the end of the school year, which we usually have. I want to have them. A lot of the educators don't. Well, I think if we don't measure on a standardized test, a nationwide standardized test that we've been using for years, if we don't do that at the end of the school year, we're not going to know where these children are. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I don't know what we're going to need to do to catch up, but who is opposing that test? It's the educators themselves.
so are you saying that the educators are standing in the way of their own careers? I mean, this is their chosen profession is education. You're saying that their attitude is anti-child education.
That is right. I ask you, we have this standardized test. It is designed to measure the progress of the children during the school year so that we'll know where they are and know what we have to do. What could be a more important time to do that than right now?
Well,
yet the educators are opposing that.
But it has to be more than just the testing principle. What else is wrong with public education that's not being done?
I think we need, wherever freedom of choice is allowed, it's worked. I think if I had a magic wand, it would be any child in any school could go to whatever school they want to go to in that school district just by saying that's where I want to go. And the money that typically that is by law goes to that child would follow them. That's what I would do. I'm for freedom of choice for the children in any way that works, including charter schools, of course, which are public schools.
Well, another effort that you're supporting is the open carry legislation. Are you prepared as governor to have the shopping area of Greenville, downtown Charleston, beaches at Myrtle Beach, the boardwalk, Hilton Head, for people to be wandering around with exposed guns on their hips or slung across their shoulders, and which is what this would be? I mean, is that
That's what it was, Colin, now, you know, that's what it would allow. And the Constitution speaks of a right to bear arms. So if we now have a concealed carry permit for open carry, that does not bother me.
So you're fine if there's an element of someone with a gun standing in line to pay their gas, or
Doesn't bother me, but I don't think it would happen. I think the doomsayers are in error. I don't think that the evil that is projected would happen at all. That's what I think.
well, this is another question that was submitted from.
Now, I'm asked, why you keep on saying this was one submitted? Are you putting
We had a
distance
lot of
between?
questions
We
submitted.
actually got a lot of really good questions.
Actually, not asking most of the questions that were submitted,
Yeah,
but we
these
do have
have
a lot of them.
been-
Is that
Yeah, these
long
are- that's
thing?
all
That's a
submitted.
question?
So,
Yeah,
How
these
much
are our
time-
ones, and then
how
these are
much
the ones
time
we
do we
submitted.
that's-
Yeah.
some of these are.
There was
gonna
a lot
end
of
up getting
interest.
cut. So, yeah, this is it.
All right.
And this is the question that was submitted. And what are you doing personally to make sure a Colorado-style shooting does not happen in South Carolina?
I think we have the best law enforcement in South Carolina, as good or better than anywhere in the United States. I think that we need the federal government needs to provide some money for the background checks and those things that where we can determine who should not be allowed to have a firearm. You can go to probate court if in South Carolina, if you know that this fellow or that woman over there is a danger for some reason, that they're mentally unstable or a variety of factors, you can go and they can be limited to not be able to purchase a firearm. But we've got a great system set up or conceived. The concept is wonderful. You have to go in and the dealer has a certain number of days that they can withhold the sale of that gun. But a lot of times that we have law enforcement around that don't send in the disposition of trials. That is, the system never learns that so-and-so was convicted of this or that. And as a result, we have a system that's full of holes. That is the way to go to it. Because listen, law-abiding citizens, by nature, the law-abiding citizens with whatever kind of firearm they have, they are not the ones causing the trouble. It's the people that have some sort of indication, either through a conviction or some other type of misbehavior, that need to be restricted. But if we don't know who they are because they don't get into the system, then it's impossible to.
You mentioned
Stop.
law enforcement there. The chief of the state law enforcement division, Mark Keel, has spoken out against this proposal.
I know.
Charleston Police Chief testified.
Yeah.
You're very close to Chief Keel. I imagine you may have spoken to him about this. And generally you listen to him pretty closely when it comes to some of these issues.
I listen to law enforcement. I don't always agree 100% law enforcement. I was sort of in it myself as 8 years Attorney General, 4 years as U.S. Attorney, and I try to study the Constitution and understand those kind of things. But that's the Second Amendment, and it is unequivocal. It's clear. We do have some limits that make sense, and I think pass constitutional muster. And if we could get our systems for detection of that, then we would not have these people getting guns in the first place.
I hear this talk about, the constitutional questions here, but the Constitution doesn't talk about bearing arms openly, right? I mean, it says you have the right to bear arms and you do have a right to own a gun in South
That's a
Carolina.
matter.
Anyone can own a gun.
That's a matter of opinion.
Well, do you think we are currently violating the Constitution in South Carolina? We haven't passed this bill yet.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's been challenged.
Okay.
But the right to bear arms is important for
Yeah.
a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And you remember, this to go back in history, this is not exactly analogous, but one of the things the British were doing were trying to take up the arms of the colonists. Now, what would have happened to the state militias if nobody had a gun anymore? There wouldn't have been a Revolutionary War.
Chief Keel says basically that this would make law enforcement's job harder, that he pointed, in fact, a number of folks have pointed to, for example, the Dallas shooting a number of years ago. Texas has open carry, and one of the problems that police reported in that scenario was you had this shooter, this active shooter, and police weren't sure if they were shooting at the wrong person or the right person because there are other people with their guns out. They talked about, Chief Keel talked about the protests last summer that we saw in Columbia and Charleston and Greenville, and that if there had been open carrying of guns, it could have made those situations even more dangerous. Do you understand where his concern is?
Yeah, I understand that 100%, but I also know if that person, if you have people that are unstable, people have been convicted of various crimes, and if that is in that system, that they have to go manage their way through before they can purchase a firearm, they wouldn't have one. That's where the emphasis ought to be.
Yeah.
Because once you start limiting the right of a law-abiding citizen to have a gun for protection or whatever reason they want it for, hunting or whatever, then I think we're in jeopardy of weakening the strength of our citizens. So, for example, we have usually when you go to buy something, they put your name in there, it'll come up almost instantly. But I think the law provides 3 days, and if nothing pops up then the citizen has to be allowed. Suppose that you are living alone and you've seen some suspicious people wandering around the neighborhood. You think you've had some break-ins or something. You say, well, I want to go get a gun. And you went to get one and it says, sorry, we're not selling guns anymore.
We have seen
that would be bad.
We've seen a number of conservative states, just changing topics slightly, but there's a reason I want to go into this immediately after what we just talked about, that have legalized medical marijuana over the last few years, including at the ballot box in 2020. There were some conservative states where they put on ballot referendum, it passed.
That's right.
You've been opposed to medical cannabis in the past. Are you still opposed to it?
And that's an area where I have gotten advice from the chief and other law enforcement, and they are 100% against it. But I have to say there are some. I don't want to legalize marijuana because I don't think it's good for you. And clearly it is not. But medical marijuana, when I was presiding over the Senate for 2 years, as you know, as Lieutenant Governor, Senator Tom Davis, who's a big proponent and very well versed in all the ins and outs, just about every day he would have an example of someone who could have benefited from medical marijuana.
Right.
Medical marijuana, it's the same as any other marijuana. It's just closely scrutinized and regulated. And he makes a very convincing argument. I try to keep an open mind. There may be a way to do it. I don't know. But I'm open to hearing more about it because it's clear that it alleviates a lot of suffering. The trick is how to keep that from turning loose marijuana production in the state that would cause damage.
And that is something Davis said, is that his bill is, as he has framed it, the most conservative medical marijuana bill in the country. It would be very restrictive in terms of who could get it.
I can almost recite everything.
Right. I'm sure he's talked to you about it a lot.
Yeah, well,
but it sounds like it's working a little bit.
Well, yeah, you also say you're open to it, and the bill's not going to get any more conservative than it is now, and the formula is not going to get any more different than it is now. So what's going to take for you to change your mind on something? It's not going to get any different. One thing
it'd have to pass the House and pass the Senate and all of that before it would get to me. And I'll make a decision at that time. I'll have to.
But you're not ruling out.
I'm not ruling it out, but I'm not ruling it in either, because law enforcement has again a very clear position there that I think has great merit.
The reason I did ask it right after the gun question is because you just said, that law enforcement's opinions on guns are not the be all end all. There are other considerations. It sounds like there may be other considerations when it comes to medical marijuana as well.
Yes.
Okay.
That's one of the things the governor has to do, is make some tough decisions.
Okay.
The business community has been pushing very hard to pass hate crime legislation. As the bill is currently written, is that something you plan on signing?
I don't know how it's currently written. It seems like every time another day goes by, they either put something in or take something out. That's one that is of interest to a lot of people. I want to see the bill. I know there's some that go from A to Z. In some states, they call it a hate crimes bill, and others they call it the same thing, and they're totally different. I'd like to see, but there is a danger in categorizing something as a crime, even if it's an enhancement, when the standard is vague.
Mhm.
So we'd first have to have a definition of hate. Exactly what is hate? And then we look at the normal, the broad scope of criminal law. They all require an overt act.
Mhm.
And even in a conspiracy crime, two or more people that combine together, just thinking about it is not a crime.
Mhm.
You can say we're going to do all these things and have immense plans and all of that, but until you take some overt act that is connected to those plans, then it's not a crime. So it's an interesting, it's not a simple area. I think we would all like to see these crazy things that are happening just go away and stop. And we want to do all we can to stop them. But we also don't want to enact something that punishes thought, because that's what the First Amendment is about, isn't it? Freedom of religion. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. It's about thought. That's why one of the three things he had on his tombstone, the University of Virginia, the Freedom of Religion Act of Virginia, and writing the Declaration of Independence. That's how important he thought the freedom of thought was.
There does
I
have to
think
be
we
an
have to-
underlying crime,
Sir?
though. There does have to be an underlying crime. in
Yes,
this bill.
there does, but you have to connect what
Yeah.
somebody said
Mhm.
with that.
Mhm.
And that's where the hard part comes in. Even the federal law, it says that the crime was committed because of the discrimination against an act of a person because of certain reasons. This is not an easy area of law, although it seems like it ought to be.
And my next question has been difficult to answer from some conservative circles, but is climate change real and is it man-made? Let's do it.
Yes, it's real. Water's coming up. And I talked to friends in Charleston that are my age. They say they can distinctly remember where the water line was when it flooded in Charleston, and now it's about 10 inches higher than it used to be, and it's more often.
Do you believe it's man-made?
I believe some, of course, is. How much, I don't know.
What is?
But it doesn't make any difference. There's certain smart things that we ought to do in response and to try to avoid it.
What are those things though? What are we not doing that we should be doing now in the short term and in the long term that's not happening right now? Because a lot of people, they look at the cost of anything having to do with flood control, water control, these kind of reactions, and they're just not going to do it. But what should we be doing?
Well, one small step we took in South Carolina was I formed the Floodwater Commission, and there's over 100 people from diverse areas of academics and experience in floods and water control, and they were informed by studies in Holland, and Tom Mulliken, who was the chairman of that group, had actually been over there and seen what they've done. And the idea is to make water our friend and not fighting it, but to make it our friend. And we're taking some steps in South Carolina. One of them, by the way, that we're getting ready to do is the power plant on April the 22nd is that Earth Day, I think. And the plan is in South Carolina to have volunteers plant 3 million trees. There's a tree over its lifetime. I can't remember how much carbon it absorbs and how much rainwater it keeps from washing around, how much water it takes in. Our environment, our natural environment here in South Carolina is precious. And it's the reason a lot of us are so happy, because we can go look at it and listen to the birds and fish and float up or down the rivers and, you know, everything in between. We have to protect that. So the coal-fired plants, we know they used to emit a whole lot. I think they still emit some carbon, but you can't just cut those things off because we depend on them. So it's a tough. How to do it is subject to debate, but I think we have to take steps to keep the air clean and keep the water clean, and whatever we can do to do that without permanently crippling our prosperity, we ought to do. But remember this is a part of national defense as well. Any country's national defense, their posture, their strength depends on their economy, because they have to pay for all of this stuff. So we must keep our economy strong, where people need jobs. When the economy slows down, families are in trouble, and your nations that are strong economically are the ones that prevail in dangerous situations. Look at World War I, World War II, all the allies, what was brought to bear on the threats at that time. It's a permanent lesson of history. So we must keep our economy strong, otherwise we're at risk. So that's why we just can't cut off one source of energy. You just can't do it that way, because we would suffer.
South Carolina is one of 12 states at this point that has continued to refuse to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. It used to be 14. Two pretty conservative states voted by ballot referendum in 2020 to do it. Now we've got a few more looking at it because Congress in the coronavirus relief package included some more incentives. They're now going to help cover some of the regular Medicaid costs if states expand Medicaid, and of course they will cover 90% of the costs of expanding Medicaid.
Yeah, for a while.
For a while, does that move the ball at all for
Nope.
you in South Carolina? Why
Nope.
not?
You may remember that it was I and I think 13 other attorneys general that filed a lawsuit against Obamacare, claiming that it was a violation of interstate commerce, which it was. We won that point. We filed that case, I think, 6 minutes after President Obama signed Obamacare. And we did win that point, that it was, they could not regulate, make you buy insurance, whether you wanted to or not, because that's a violation of interstate commerce. So they took a tack that I think was intellectually suspect. And that is that the premium or the fee that you would have to pay if you didn't get insurance was a tax, and therefore it was allowed under the taxing authority of Congress. I think that notion has been criticized more than it's been supported. But the answer is, that's not the answer. The Obamacare, the reason we didn't like it to begin with was because although the federal government was paying for it at first, and the federal government is us, we're the ones that pay the money into the federal government. They would pay for it at first, but then it would impose a cost after some number of years of about $1 billion a year. Well, we've got right now, we have about an $8.9 billion budget, not counting federal funds that are coming. Where are we going to find $1 billion to do that? The better answer is things like broadband, is things like strong health clinics. If we can get broadband out into particularly the rural areas, and people can can bring the doctor to them on their cell phone or on their computer instead of going to see the doctor. If we have good health information out for people, if we have jobs for people so they can make money, so they can take care of their families better and eat the right foods and all those things, that is the answer. Pouring more and more money into a system that is full of waste through an enormous bureaucracy, that in the case of Obamacare, with taxing you for not buying something that you don't want or don't need. I mean, that is a terrible constitutional problem right there. That is not the answer.
There is a lot of public health research about the the public costs of people not having
I
insurance.
know,
As in because if people don't get checkups, don't go to the doctor because they don't have health insurance, they end up in the emergency room down the line, which ends up costing the state more. And
Right.
I do want to make a point about just the cost of this.
Well, yeah,
that-
but on
Okay.
that, they did say that if we all of a sudden had insurance, none of that stuff was happening.
Yeah.
Arguments like that of, it's going to cost us a lot of money, but look at all the money it'll save. Some of those arguments are good. Some of them they make for everything that some folks want to pass. I'm not persuaded by that.
One of the things that seemed to cost Donald Trump was he never really spelled out what he wanted to do or why he wanted a second term. You've already committed and announced that you're going to seek another term. What would be the three things that you want to accomplish as governor in another 4 years? What would you put to the top of the list? What do you want to do?
Well, there are three things. It's the economy, it's education, and the environment. Those are the three things.
Specifics, those.
Well, I'd like to reduce taxes, which, by the way, the current, this bill, the American Rescue Act, has a phrase in there that says, if you take the money, that you cannot directly or indirectly reduce taxes. Now, I think that's unconstitutional. But I'd like to reduce taxes, reduce regulations. I'd like to enhance education. We need to invest for the future in education. We have the basic structure, but we need to rev it up.
In what way though? What specifically, what does rev it up mean? What are you going to do?
Well, we have to have, I think, 4K kindergarten all across the state, for one thing. We have to, and I've asked for funds for retraining of people who've lost their jobs through, a lot of them in the service industries, through the technical colleges. We're not using the technical colleges as much as we could, although we do have the best system in the entire country. But we need to make that transition from 4K on up through high school, then in technical college, if you want to go in that direction, or 4-year comprehensive, or on to 2 or 3 PhDs. We need to make that easier for people to do. We need to invest in the kind of technology, the kind of industries, the kind of businesses that are going to enhance our ability as people, our talent, for people to fully use their talents to do what they want to do. That means we have to have a lot of smart people working. We need to have those kind of businesses, those kind of industries, and we're doing very well with that in South Carolina right now.
In that 2018 campaign, you were able to tout the fact that you had this close relationship with, at the time, the president.
Yeah.
And you were able to say South Carolina's got leverage in the White House and we have this close ally. He's obviously out of the White House now. We've got Biden in there. Did the South Carolina, first of all, what is your relationship with the current president? Like, have you spoken to him at all? Is South Carolina going to lose out by virtue of the fact that you don't have as close of a relationship with him as you did with his predecessor?
No, I don't think that we'll lose out, because South Carolina is a very important state. Last time I spoke to then the former vice president was at Senator Hollings' funeral. He and I were both, and Congressman Clyburn and Judge Duffy were all invited to speak there. I first met Joe Biden when he was a senator, brand new senator, and he almost quit after the tragic accident of his wife and child, and it was Senator Hollings that talked him into going on through with it. And Joe Biden, now President Biden, has said that, but I met him when I was working for Senator Thurmond up there, and I need to say that the man that back then is not the same fellow that's on television these days. He's a little bit different. I've always liked him. I don't know him well, but know him. But President Trump is one of my favorites, of course, of all time. And Peg and I have a friendship and with him and Melania, and we are proud to be their friends.
You spoken to him since he left office?
Yep.
About just catching up?
Well,
or-
you might have noticed he endorsed me.
I did notice that. Yeah.
And he's going to be coming to the state to emphasized that endorsement at some time. He's come for some others as well. But I think a lot of people didn't like his rhetoric and all that. But if you look at what the man did, it's hard to say that he wasn't a great president.
All right, on that, we're getting near the end, but we're going to want to finish with our lightning round. But first, we want to thank Governor McMaster for appearing. Cheers, Governor. We also would like to thank South Carolina AARP and also the folks here at Savage Craft. We just really enjoyed the
Yes.
hospitality. So we have some quick, nonsensical questions. We want to answer.
Nonsensical.
So,
I thought some of them you already asked were nonsense.
all right, let's. How about this one? Most ex-presidents need a library. South Carolina was very good to Donald Trump's presidential launch. Would you ever get behind an effort to bring a Trump library to South Carolina?
Yes.
How would that, what shape would that look like in your view? Where would you put it?
Well, probably they have parts of the USC library are dedicated to certain people. And you have, I think all of Senator Hollings' papers are there, and I don't know about Senator Thurman's. They have all sorts of collections there, but there may be some other schools that would want to do that. I think there may be a lot of presidents that we would like to honor. I would also like to see something to President Reagan somewhere. I think he was a great president.
Do you think that Trump should run again in 2024?
I think he should. I think there are a lot of people that want him to.
You're among them.
I'm among them. And
If he chooses not to, there's been a lot of talk about your predecessor, Nikki Haley, running for president. If Trump does not run and she does, would you support her?
Well, that depends on if anyone else from South Carolina runs. And
Are you thinking about it? Or?
No, I'm not thinking about it, but she certainly has made her mark and is quite capable. But I'm a full supporter of President Trump, and I know people don't like some of the ways he talks, but I'd say look at what he does, because that's what counts.
Some talk about Tim Scott too, maybe as a potential contender.
I think Tim Scott would be a great candidate.
You surprised a lot of us when I think you went to West Florence High School and you pulled out your guitar and played Paul McCartney's Mull of Kintyre at their graduation.
Yeah, I don't think anybody there had ever heard that song. They probably didn't recognize it when I sang it.
You probably sent sales through the roof for him because people were looking it up. But how often do you practice, and what's a jam session at the governor's mansion like after hours?
Well, it's very interesting because unless my son is there playing and my daughter's there playing and singing, it's probably not very good. But I've got several guitars and I love to play them when I have the time. I wish I was better at it. There's a lot of music. There's a lot of inspiration in music, and some of the greatest poetry of today or many years is found in music. Music's an international language. Everybody understands it. Everyone has their favorite songs. That they hear that song and they everything is okay, and it's great medicine. And there've been people with Alzheimer's who couldn't speak and couldn't communicate. And when I saw a video the other day of a woman singing "Jesus Loves Me," a woman who was in very bad state, she started singing herself. So I think music's very important, and I wish I had more time to spend on it.
This will be our last question. There's one issue that's really dividing the state, and households, marriages, everyone seems to be fighting over this, and they just can't get together on this. So we would like you to pick what your choice is for the South Carolina state flag, and these are your options. So if you could circle which one you prefer and why.
Well, these are the two options.
Those are the two options.
Although, when it gets to the Senate floor, who knows how many amendments
Yeah, you
people
might
could
put an
try.
amendment or two on there. And they didn't.
So good. There we go.
If you like the crescent of one and the
Yeah.
palmetto of another,
And-
maybe we can mix and
Yeah.
match.
Can I draw up my own?
Yeah.
here?
This is the first,
Controversial.
first time we've ever
Choose
used a
wisely.
prompt.
Re-election may depend on it.
On this one, I don't like the wiggly nature of that trunk.
Yeah.
I'd like prefer a straighter trunk. The crescents are exactly the same. By the way, you know, that is not the crescent moon.
No, that's-
All right.
That is the crescent that the Revolutionary War soldiers wore as a decoration. It was taken from some other country somewhere. Did you know that?
I did. I
Did you know that?
Thanks
Yeah,
to
yes,
this
sir.
flag today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might be stalling as well.
It might be. How much time we got?
We got plenty of time.
Oh, yeah, well, I would say hard decision there. I think I like the top one a little bit better because, but yeah, I like the top one
That's the one
better.
the committee picked,
Yeah,
I
that's,
think, so, yeah.
so-
Well, in that case, I'll go the other direction. Do you want me to do
Yeah, sure,
something?
just circle between you like and different.
Should I write Schuyler
Yeah, if you want
Crawford?
to, yeah.
There you
All
go.
right,
All right.
there's your evidence.
This was the governor's pick right here.
Is that the one they picked?
That is the one the committee picked, but it's still going to the floor now, and who knows
Oh,
what
who
kind
knows?
of, amendments they may try to tack onto it.
Well, if we get rid of the Palmetto tree, we ought to put a live oak up there. But for the history, you know, it's Sullivan's Island when the British attacked. Mhm. Did you know that,
Yep, yes,
Scott?
sir. All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
My
Thank
pleasure. Pleasure, pleasure. Applause.
All right. Oh, it was fun, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right, before we wrap up, a couple things. One, go online, Google Post and Courier, Pints and Politics. It will bring up a video page and you'll be able to watch any Pints and Politics we've done since the first one 2 years ago, back when Mark Sanford was running for president. We have all the presidential candidates, people from all over the state. Lindsey Graham's been on a couple times. Nancy Mace's been on a couple times. I want to thank our sponsors, South Carolina AARP. This is their second year being a sponsor of Pints and Politics, and this brewery that opened 5 weeks ago here in West Columbia, Savage Craft Ale Works. And I want to introduce you to Andy Shane if you don't already know him. He runs our Columbia Bureau. So Andy, one of the things that I really like about working at the Post and Courier is how much we invest in our newsrooms. So can you tell me a little bit about how many reporters we have, what they're covering, especially when it comes to the State House?
Sure. Well, we have 13 journalists here based in Columbia, actually not right down Hardin Street at Hardin and Gervais in our office that we have there. We cover everything from local government, schools, the State House, sports, education, and business. I mean, we really have a full team here dedicated to covering the city and also obviously covering the State House with Jamie and with Shauna Adcox, who is actually the Dean of the State House Press Corps.
So legislature's in session. I watch you guys. It's, really January till, well, the end of the session, May. You are working so hard the minute you wake up till, well, late at night. You want to tell me a little bit about what that feels like covering the State House? Give us a behind the curtain.
A lot of hurry up and wait is what I would pretty much say. You anticipate things happening during the day, especially when things are supposed to be talked about on the floor in the session. And what happens essentially is you have to wait sometimes for side arguments, tangents, other things that come up. Sometimes the legislature will decide to honor a winning sports team, so you have to wait for those kinds of things. But it's pretty intense. Things can also change. We think things are going to head in one direction. All of a sudden, there's a compromise in a totally different direction. In the meantime, the governor may have a news conference in the middle of all of this and throw his weight behind it. The days can be fairly long, as Jamie can attest, especially Wednesdays, which is sort of the biggest day, the longest day that they have each week. But we also have very long days, usually when they're trying to finalize the budget. When you're trying to figure out how to spend $10 billion, that's not something that's going to happen very quickly. So it's a pretty intense time. It's pretty fun. I mean, if you like politics, I do. And it was fun when I was doing it day to day. And I would say that Jamie, based on the fact that he keeps on coming back and doing it and hasn't screamed at me yet, says it's fun as well.
All right. So if people want to follow our 11 Columbia journalists, what's the best way for them to do that?
Many ways to do that. We have our own Twitter account, which is at PC Columbia. Actually, on that, I have on top a list of how you can follow all of our reporters and editors here in Columbia. We also have a page, a dedicated page to Columbia News, which is postandcourier.com/Columbia, where we, in addition to also all the news that we have here in the Columbia region, we also put all the stories that we have from the State House on there as well, because obviously happens here in Columbia for the most part. So please follow us there. We also have newsletters. We have 5 newsletters that we put out just from the Columbia office. We have a daily newsletter. We have daily headlines. We have a business headlines newsletter. We have weekend. We have a food newsletter, and I also put out a newsletter as well. But the most important one, probably for a lot of you watching today, is a newsletter we put out wide for the newspaper, which is Palmetto Politics. That is something that's done daily. Jamie contributes to it. Shauna Adcox also contributes to it as well. That is one of our more popular newsletters. And if you're trying to follow South Carolina politics, that's the place to come, in my opinion. And the one thing I always like to also, just one thing I want to tout, is always the idea that, again, in order to pay for all of this coverage, to pay for everything that you read in the Post and Courier, we encourage you to subscribe. That's just really what that comes down to. People say, oh, I hit the paywall. Well, there's a reason for that. We need you to pay because, again, it doesn't come cheap. It doesn't come free. Take a look at Jamie back here. He ain't cheap. He ain't free. Just trust me. So, but that said, I mean, all jokes aside, it's really what matters to you to support us and support what we're doing, so that we're giving you timely, accurate, insightful information. So, and for those who are subscribing, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for joining us.